Good evening. We'll call this meeting of the City Council August the 6th to order, please. Ms. Raymond, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. We'll have our roll call, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Here.
Mayor Hogue.
Here.
Councilmember Morrison.
Here.
Councilmember Randalls. Present. Councilmember Raymond.
Here.
Hey, we have public participation tonight. We have a card from Mr. Osborne.
Good evening. City Manager. Working on a letter to send to the city manager. And I really appreciate and but I'd also like to propose another study. I have a list of archaeological site that other area, Oak Lane, has a cabin that was Canaveral. Owners and residents properties with local historic districts. Practices historic districts are can possibly impact the local potential and local districts provide social and psychological benefits. And local districts Titusville has a historic like the city manager. Or historical society.
Okay, right, thank you. Yep, we'll look forward to it. Thanks. Okay, we'll close public participation and we're into public hearings. Ordinance number 14, 2019. Mr. Garganese.
Okay, Ordinance 14-2019, an emergency ordinance of the City of Cape Canaveral, Florida, amending Chapter 26 elections of the Code of Ordinances, changing the qualifying period for candidates for the office of City Council for the 2019 city regular election to be consistent with the requirements established by the Brevard County Supervisor of Elections to provide Spanish language ballots pursuant to preliminary injunction issued by the Federal District Court in Madera versus Lee, case number 1:18 CV 152-MW/GRJ, Northern District of Florida, May 10th, 2019. And a related directive issued to the Supervisor of Elections by the Florida Secretary of State, providing an effective date and repeal a provision. This is being proposed as an emergency ordinance. The council can take action immediately regarding this ordinance. It does not require a second reading. I think the ordinance is pretty self-explanatory, but just for the benefit of the public, the city clerk's office was notified in July when she met with the supervisor of elections along with other city clerks in Brevard County. At that time, the Brevard County Supervisor of Elections notified the cities throughout Brevard County of a recent case, Madera versus Lee. In that case, a group of plaintiffs who were voters educated in Puerto Rico brought suit in federal district court up there in the Panhandle to enforce the Voting Rights Act and to require Spanish language ballots in certain elections held in the state of Florida. That case was decided in favor of the plaintiffs. Preliminary injunction was issued by the federal district court judge to the state of Florida. As a result of that injunction, the Secretary of State's office has issued a directive to Supervisor of Elections in those counties that are affected by this order. Brevard County is affected by this order, and the bottom line is that in order to comply with this directive, the Supervisor of Elections has made the request to the clerk to, if you're going to hold an election in 2019, the federal district court order states that facsimile ballots must be printed in Spanish as well as other election materials in order to meet the deadline for preparing those ballots and election materials in Spanish. The Supervisor of Election needs to have all of the list of candidates for elections in 2019 and any referendum language no later than 78 days prior to the city's election. Currently, the city's qualifying period does not permit the city to meet the deadline imposed by the Brevard County Supervisor of Elections. In order to meet that deadline, the city's current 2-week qualifying period needs to be reduced by 4 days to a 10-day qualifying period for this election in 2019. And that's what this ordinance does. This ordinance is limited to the 2019 election. If passed, the qualifying period will be 10 days for the 2019 election. It starts, I believe, on August 9th. That's when it starts.
Starts August.
Yeah, so at noon, and would end on, I guess, noon on August 19th. 4 days shorter than, currently set forth in the charter. This ordinance is, of course, being brought to you as an emergency because you are currently 3 days away from the start of qualifying. There's no other way to address the federal district court's order and the directive from the supervisor without taking immediate action. There's no other alternative, in my opinion. So the request is for council to consider adopting this ordinance as an emergency ordinance. My legal opinion, compliance with a federal district court order would constitute an emergency under the circumstances. Yeah, I'd be happy to answer any specific questions you may have.
I don't really have any other than this is just strictly for this election, not any future election, just this election.
We would have to also, for 2020, rather than facsimile ballots, there will be a Spanish ballot requirement. So that's an issue that the city is going to have to address in 2020 by another ordinance in order to comply with the supervisor's deadline.
That was the only thing I was ever asked about it, was this applying to all elections or not. It's just this election, and then we'll deal with the future when it
Yeah, we'll
gets.
deal with the future.
Well,
You know,
that's the only thing I had.
the future will have to, we would have to take a look at the qualifying period because it has to, we'd have to make sure everything's addressed by the presidential primary in 2020.
I understand. Okay, Mr. Reed, did you have anything you want to?
No, it's just that this emergency ordinance has a short duration of actually being effective 61 days, and then it expires. So in the intervening period, sometime between now and then, council and staff and the city attorney and all would have to address reestablishing for future elections the period of time that the council wishes to have available for the qualifying period, whether it be 10 days, 14 days, something longer, something less, so that we can be sure to time it such that we can meet the new requirements that we're going to be under by the supervisor elections, the Florida Department of Elections, based upon the judicial decision.
Thank you. Counsel? Us? Want to start down with Ms. Raymond?
Yeah,
No comment here.
no, just to be sure I understand it, and this comes from the new mandate that says that Florida ballots has to have bilingual ballots. And due to the fact that our election's coming up, in order to have time to print ballots in 2 different languages, we need to shorten the normal 2-week period down to 10 days so they can print the ballots in 2 languages. I got it. I understand it.
Yeah,
Specifically, it's Spanish, English, the bilingual. Thank you.
Spanish and English, right. I'm thinking they may have 2 ballots, I don't know, but that's what it is Spanish ballots and English ballots. So, Mr. Morrison?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. No major comments on this. Makes sense to me. I can hats off to the city staff for working quickly to get this done. A lot of pressure on the supervisor of election. I think this is a very good thing. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight. Mr. Brown?
No comment.
I have no comment either. So, city will open it to public discussion. Is anybody, I don't have any cards on this. If you want to talk, I would like to have a card. Otherwise, you can speak to this if you need to, but it's just something that we got mandated to do that we have to do. Something that we didn't choose to do. It's mandated that we do it. If nobody has, yes, sir? I will need you to come up to the podium, and I will need you to fill out a card for the information. You can do it after you speak, and then just hand it in, please. No, we're putting this ordinance in place so that the supervisor election can get ballots printed in English and Spanish. And then they will be given out at the polls as needed.
So instead of bypassing, we're trying to comply.
We're complying with an order.
And so the only way we can comply is by shortening the period this year for the qualifying period. And then this time next year, in future years, we'll have this resolved permanently, we hope.
Thank you. Ray, are you gonna, we'll add it to this card, or you can fill out one? It's possible.
Yes, this year only, if the council adopts the ordinance, the qualifying period would be shortened from 14 days to 10 days. just this one time so that the supervisor of elections, who actually conducts our elections for us, can have the appropriate amount of time to do what she needs to do, prepare the language and address this Spanish as well as English, and additionally the time for review and edits and clarifications.
Good, and so qualifying period begins this Friday, is that correct?
Correct,
Okay, so it would be
correct,
instead of 14 days.
correct.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else? We'll close public hearing. Council,
Mr. Chair, if you have no more discussion from the council, I'd make a
if
motion.
anybody has anything to say, no
Okay.
discussion, we'll look for a motion.
If you have no more discussion, I understand it, and Randall's will move for adoption of ordinance number 20. Let's go number 14-2019 that we've just discussed.
And I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Randalls and a second by Mrs. Raymond. Would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Brown?
4.
Mayor Hogue?
4.
Councilmember Morrison?
4.
Councilmember Randalls?
For the motion.
Councilmember Raymond?
4.
Thank you, and passes it, and it brings our agenda to a close. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, Wes.